It's an interview MiWeek, the latest on conditions in Flint from the pediatrician who exposed the lead levels in children, plus a conversation with 3 university presidents on the impact research has on the state, and a roundtable on business and development in Detroit. Stay put, MiWeek starts right now.
Did you know Roush Enterprises was selected by Google to assemble a test fleet of 100 prototype self-driving cars in 2015? It also produced the new Domino's delivery cars. And speaking of Domino's, Domino's sells well over 2 million pizzas per day around the world, and half of their sales are digital. These are just some of the ways Michigan's pioneers started out as small companies with big ideas.
We are business leaders for Michigan. We are committed to making Michigan a top 10 state for jobs, personal income, and a healthy economy. Funding is also provided by Delta.
Hi there, and thanks so much for joining me for MiWeek. I'm Christy McDonald. We're changing it up on the show tonight and bringing you in-depth interviews from our time up at the Mackinac Policy Conference. Coming up, from the Flint water crisis, you'll hear from Flint pediatrician Dr. Mona Hanna-Attisha. Also, a conversation with the presidents of U of M, Wayne State, and Michigan State. Business leaders with their take on Michigan's economic recovery, and the head of Rock Ventures, Matt Cullen, on development in downtown Detroit. That is all coming up for you. And we begin, though, at the latest on the water crisis in Flint. I spoke with Dr. Mona Hanna-Attisha, the pediatrician from Hurley Medical Center, who discovered the high lead levels in Flint children last fall, which was linked to the city's water supply. She is working with MSU Extension to help the families in Flint get the help they need to recover from this crisis. And she is passionate in demanding as many resources as possible.
We are in our 3rd year of water that we cannot drink. In April of 2014, this started, and this April started our 3rd year where our people, our children, cannot drink the water. So it's unprecedented to be in the middle of the Great Lakes and to not have access to safe drinking water. And unlike any other disaster or natural disaster that has struck our state or our nation, this is something that we may have to deal with for decades and really generations to come. And we have yet to garner the long-term resources for our kids or for our community to heal. So the water is still a problem, and we keep talking about Flint. I keep talking about Flint because we have yet to invest in Flint so that we can recover, and not only recover, but thrive because of this incident.
You sound frustrated. Are you frustrated that the legislature has not come through yet with the funding?
Yeah, I'm frustrated. So the governor has a great budget that he's proposed, and it has yet to pass the state legislature. Congress in D.C. has given $0 to Flint. Despite all this talk about Flint, it's a national story. Limited resources have come to Flint, and limited resources have come when you understand the extent of this long-term problem.
What has this past 10 months been like for you?
Yeah,
how has it changed your life?
It's significantly changed my life, but in a great way. I feel fortunate to be able to serve my community, to be able to serve my patients. It's been exhausting, but it's been exhilarating. You know, the same urgency that we had when we were doing this research, because we had to know what was happening to our kids, is the same urgency that we have right now, because if we don't keep talking about Flint, you know, they're going to start talking about Zika and some other thing in the state or what have you. So we need to garner the resources for our children.
All right, so talk to me a little bit now, Jeff, about how you're working with the community and making sure that people understand that the resources that they have and to be able to help them.
Right, so I think what's important to know is Extension, we have 600 people throughout the state of Michigan. Before this ever started, we had 15 people in Flint and Genesee County. So we were there, we have a history there, we have our folks live and work there, and so we've had the great opportunity to work with Dr. Mona and other healthcare providers on health-related issues like what to eat and how to prepare it and where to get it and that sort of thing. We were able to take a class we call Cooking Matters and rotate that content a little bit to include items high in vitamin C, iron, and calcium to deal with the lead absorption issues that youth and kids in Flint were dealing with. But Extension's also been able to do some other things. So There are concerns, for example, about lead in the soils. And so we're working with MDARD and others to do soil testing in Flint. Edible Flint is a big part of what Extension does in Flint. We work with over 800 community gardeners in Flint alone, and to help them grow nutritious foods. We also work with families and parents around stress issues and mindfulness and personal finance issues. And so we're involved in health, and we're lucky to work with Dr. Mona in that context. But we also try and look at the whole person and the whole family, because if a mother is worried about paying the rent and where she's going to get the groceries, it's sometimes hard to focus on some of these other issues that we'd like her to focus on as well.
Dr. Mona, what are some of your patients telling you, and kids and their parents? What are they telling you now?
So what we're seeing right now and what they're telling us is a lot of stress. They're worried. You see fear in their eyes. They're anxious. They feel guilty. So that's the acute thing that we are seeing and hearing from our patients. And what we do best as pediatricians is a lot of reassurance, is a lot of hope building. So we're trying to build a lot of hope in our families and empower our families. Say, hey, you're going to be okay, and this is what you need to do. Love your child and sing to them and read to them and talk to them and turn off the TV and put them in preschool and give them this great nutrition and come visit me at every visit, and we'll make sure your kid's okay.
But I would think that there would be a problem with trust as well.
Absolutely.
That people don't maybe exactly trust what they're hearing from programs, and they think, well, maybe this could be good, but you know what? I trusted that when I turned the tap on that my water was fine, when it was repeatedly told to me that it was fine. How do you repair that, and how do you play a role in trying to repair that?
So building of trust takes time. It takes decades. And the neat thing about MSU and about Hurley, where I'm at, is that we've been in the community for over a century. MSU Extension has been in Flint for over a century, as has Hurley. So we are trusted partners. But it is going to take time to continue working on that trust and that rapport building and sitting down with those families and listening to their concerns and being as empathetic as possible and understanding their frustrations, because they have been through so much. This has been a trauma. The entire community, you can think about, is going through PTSD. So it takes it's going to be a long road to heal and to recover, but just being there, being constantly visible, and providing the necessary resources.
Being constantly visible and providing those resources, but also making sure that you're getting to people that know that they have that available to them. I mean, you already have people that are engaged with you. It's also reaching people that maybe haven't even been to a pediatrician in years with their children.
Absolutely.
And you're exactly right, and I think that's one of the exciting things that's happening in Flint. Is a lot of what you see Dr. Mona and others doing is built on a foundation that was already being put in place. So the pediatric clinic moved above the farmer's market a year ago. It's a beautiful setting, right? It's an opportunity to prescribe to families and to children, go downstairs and get fresh vegetables.
We're the only clinic in the country that's co-located in a farmer's market to address food insecurity. There are no grocery stores in Flint. So we give prescriptions for healthy food, and they go downstairs and then get the healthy food. So we were already trying to tackle these other issues that weren't making our kids healthy. And the lead came on top of that. But we already kind of had that foundation. And with all the resources coming in, we only see a brighter future for our kids, brighter than really their yesterday ever was before this crisis.
Your voice has been one that has cut through a lot of the clutter, and that people listen to. So what would you say to the legislature right now in Lansing about what they need to do for Flint?
Yeah, I think it's, they need to put politics aside. This is not a political issue. This is not a partisan issue. This is not who did what when. And this is about children. This is a humanitarian issue. This is about turning on your tap and getting safe water. So we need to all come together, because Michigan cannot be strong until all of our cities are strong. And Michigan can't be strong until all of our children have the same opportunity to be strong. So we need to invest in our kids, the younger the better, because until Flint shines, the state is not going to shine.
Turning now to an alliance between three major universities. The University of Michigan, Michigan State, and Wayne State make up the University Research Corridor. And over the past 10 years, this partnership has had a big economic impact on the state of Michigan. Well, I sat down with the presidents of the three universities, U of M's Dr. Mark Schlissel, MSU's Dr. Luana K. Simon, and Wayne State's Dr. M. Roy Wilson, to talk about how the Research Corridor is also impacting Detroit's resurgence.
The three universities, individually and collectively, have an enormous footprint in Detroit. Whether you measure it in terms of economic impact, employment of the citizens of Detroit, involvement in the Detroit schools, helping students and teachers research that makes communities healthier, that provides art and culture to the city. We're deeply entrenched in the city of Detroit.
For the last 10 years, this alliance has really come together. Talk to me a little bit about how it has worked and how it has gelled, I guess, throughout the years.
Well, I think it's become a culture for our institutions. We announced it 10 years ago on the island as a way of taking the universities that had about 90% of the research in the state, combining that in a way that both recognizes we were going to compete on certain things, but collaboration was really more important. Each sector report we've done has been important to Michigan, from life sciences to automotive to water. And this report just represents the fact that in the future of the state is tied so closely to Detroit's resurgence. It's good for all of us.
And we know, Dr. Wilson, that the footprints that the universities have in each of their towns make such a big difference. And no more than Wayne State University has really played a huge part in the area and the neighborhoods surrounding where the university is in terms of public safety and so much more in helping spur development. Talk a little bit about how things have changed around Wayne State and the city of Detroit in just the past 2 years.
So as you mentioned, we've been in Midtown for a long time, almost 150 years. I've been there for 3 years now in Detroit. And just in the 3 years that I've been there, it's unrecognizable. The Midtown area is thriving. Our public safety is a big part of that. People feel safe to be able to come down and open up businesses and to live because they know that they're going to be safe. Restaurants opening up all the time. But the main thing, though, that I think is very important is that the educational opportunities for the students to be able to get internships, be able to contribute to what's going on in Detroit and maybe even get a job afterwards in places that they get their internships is a big driver for our students. And I think all three of our institutions really benefit from Detroit's resurgence, and that students really want to be a part of what's going on in Detroit and want to come to our institutions so they can be a part of what's going on in Detroit. And that certainly benefits Wayne State a lot. And I would imagine that there's a little bit of that also that affects both Michigan and Michigan State, that desire to want to be able to be a part of the solution of what's going on in Detroit.
It really does, and I think that as well, I mean, it's easy to think about any region of the state as competing with another region. And part of, I think, the message of the URC is that when our students come to Detroit because they're excited about placemaking, it means that they're more likely to stay in the state of Michigan.
And that's what my next question was going to be to all of you. You know, so much we talk about it's so important that our kids get a higher education. Yeah. And once you have them at your universities and then they graduate, we don't want them to leave the state of Michigan. What is it about the retention of the students here and making Michigan the place they want to be, Detroit the place they want to be, instead of going to the Chicagos or going to Boston or going to San Francisco? Let me start with you.
You know, it's all about the economic opportunities that are provided by the improving economy of the state as a whole. Detroit in particular. All you have to do is go through downtown and midtown, the high occupancy of housing, all the startup businesses, new iconic brands like Shinola coming out of Detroit. So I think students see an economic future in the state of Michigan. Another very important aspect of this for a long time has been the health of the auto industry. So many of our engineering graduates in particular go on to work for the major auto companies, that it's extremely important to keep the heart of innovation in auto here to provide exciting jobs for these great students we're graduating.
How would you add to that?
I would say that our institutions are responsible for educating students who go anywhere in the world and be successful. So there has to be a positive draw to stay in Michigan. I think the mobility, Planet M, the mobility issue that Michigan has led is so critical to that. I think if you look at vital cities, that Chicago is a vital city. Those cities have more than one research university. They're actively engaged in them. And so this consortium provides that sort of sense of purpose around the city of Detroit.
What about the retention?
Well, you know, we get a lot of students from out of state and a lot of international students, but disproportionately, in relation to the other two universities, we probably get many more students from the Detroit area. And so that's really where most of our students come from, southeastern Michigan, particularly in Detroit. And so already to be able to, you know, be in your home environment, so to speak, and get a world-class education, many of them are already going to be their mindset is already geared towards staying in Detroit. And so we have an advantage there. And we try to give them the opportunity to be able to stay in Detroit by offering the kind of opportunities that both Mark and Luana mentioned, you know, the job opportunities, the internship opportunities to be able to stay in Detroit. And with Detroit's revitalization, many of those opportunities are now much more abundant than they were 3 years ago.
Michigan's economic recovery has been a slow one, but there is progress. How does the rest of the country view Michigan and what we have in terms of a good business climate and a skilled workforce? Well, let's get a frank assessment from our roundtable. Business Leaders for Michigan CEO Doug Rothwell, the CEO of Strategic Staffing Solutions Cindy Paskey, and the CEO of the Detroit Regional Chamber, Sandy Barua.
We're down to what? Unemployment below the national average. I mean, when was the last time that happened? We've regained about half to 2/3 of all the jobs we lost during that, awful decade of the 2000s. We've got an auto industry that is, going on steroids right now. I mean, they're just growing so fast, which is our signature industry in the state. So, I mean, I think you got to feel pretty good overall about where we are.
Cindy, from your vantage point, how do you feel?
Oh, I think we're certainly in a better place. Detroit's certainly in a better place, but we still have a fair amount of work to do. You know, in the S3 world, with where we are around the world, I'm traveling all the time. So one of the ways I measure that is the questions that I receive about our city. And now it's, should we invest? What other industries could we do? Can we come and see what's going on? A much different set of questions than we had 6 years ago.
You know, it's interesting because my next question was going to be, what's the perception of not only Michigan right now, but of Detroit? But why don't you go ahead and give us an idea?
You know, it's absolutely different. It's the stories and the interest are, this is a place for entrepreneurs to be. This is a place that has now stellar political leadership, that has opportunities, that housing is available, land is available, but in a good way. And that's what we need, right? I mean, look at this. If I read 5 newspapers every single day, and I always have, and they're actually real papers. But if you run the headlines every single day, Financial Times, Wall Street Journal, and look at what's actually being said about our state, and then, of course, for me, about our city, Detroit, it's night and day from 6 years ago. Night and day.
Sandy, what's your impression of where we are right now?
So I think Michigan and the city of Detroit gets the award for the most improved. Because when you consider where we were a decade ago, or frankly even 5 years ago, to where we are today, to really expand on Doug's points, we are tremendously in better shape. However, we have some red flashing lights. It's almost like the things that we need to do going forward are going to be even more difficult to resolve than the issues we resolved over the last 6 years. We have to solve our educational challenge in the state of Michigan. That's both K through 12 and in higher ed. And this is something that Doug and I have worked on quite a bit, but particularly Business Leaders for Michigan is really focused on the challenge we have in higher ed funding. We need more of our Michigan folks to get some sort of higher degree. It doesn't have to be a 4-year college degree, as important as that is, but a 2-year associate's degree, a highly skilled certificate like a nursing certificate or a welding certificate. Best-in-class regions across the world have roughly 60% of their population that fall into one of those 3 categories. Right now, we're at about 36% in the Detroit region. We need to do a lot better.
So, Doug, what are business leaders telling you about in terms of education programs here and also job training skills to be able to fill the jobs that they have?
Well, just what Sandy said. I mean, the reality is we're creating all these jobs, but we don't necessarily have the talent that we need to fill them all. And our worry is that will we be able to continue to fill those jobs in the future if we don't do what Sandy just mentioned, is to produce more talent with the right education and training that we need. Our message is, look, don't stop your education after high school, continue it. Let's make sure that we get more kids to come to school in Michigan so that we correct some of the demographic challenges we have as a state that's getting older. And let's do more to make sure that it's a priority in the budget to keep it affordable for kids to be able to get this education.
And finally tonight, a closer look at developments in downtown Detroit. Quicken Loans founder Dan Gilbert and his various investment and real estate companies have had a major impact on the resurgence of downtown. More companies are renting space, retail is picking up, and investment is moving into more housing. Rock Ventures CEO Matt Cullen sat down with me to talk about the prospect of soccer downtown, the Q Line, and the latest development projects.
What's changing now is the pace of growth, which is increasing all the time. And I mean, we have Q-Line now, which is almost done. And you're seeing billions of dollars of development along that corridor. You're seeing a lot of efforts into the neighborhoods with the mayor's blight removal, with Rehab and Ready, a number of other projects. The riverfront is expanding, tremendous expansion of residential. Nike store, I mean, you know, who'd have thought we'd have a Nike store downtown, right? So, I mean, really, across all of the corridors of industrial, office, residential, retail, tremendous growth and really primed for even more coming up.
You know, I think it's really amazing when you take a look at the investment that is down there and from your company and all sorts of others, and we look at how you go about making those investments and what kind of strategic planning goes into saying, all right, well, this is the next building that we're going to go after and we're going to develop for a specific use. Give us an idea of some of those conversations that happen behind the scenes about how you plot out your next steps.
Sure, a lot of it has to do with density and concentration, right? So we really think that we can, if we focus on certain geographic areas, and obviously we started off kind of Campus Martius to Grand Circus, and we wanted to create an area there that was very strong and vibrant. And so we identified all the key buildings there, have purchased a lot of them. A lot of other people have come in, now Capitol Park, Paradise Valley, and then the whole Woodward corridor is exploding. And so I think along that corridor is tremendous. And now we're getting into residential, so we kind of want to make sure that we're working on behalf of everybody in the city, and so we're doing some Brush Park and affordable housing in Brush Park and micro lofts, and so there's a lot of strategy, but there's some opportunistic kind of approach to it too. I mean, if building's available, we think it's something we can make good use out of, and we work hard to do that.
All right, I want to talk a little bit. I want to talk transportation. I
Sure.
do want to talk a little bit about the Q line and where we're headed there, and talking a little bit about regional transportation that everyone is talking about on the island right now, and the push for some kind of concerted effort in Southeast Michigan. How does the Q line fit into all of that?
Well, it's really a key component. When we started on the Q line, we wanted it to be a catalyst for economic development. I just mentioned there's billions of dollars taking place along that corridor. We wanted it to be a catalyst for regional transit. And then we just had a press conference on it, and we talked about how regional transit is an imperative for business success in our region. It's as simple as that. If we're not competitive, from a transit perspective, we won't be competitive from an economy standpoint. And what you see across the country is economic development follows those corridors of transit, and it's a social imperative. We have a huge percentage of our population that literally can't get to church, school, jobs, what have you. We have to fix it.
How do you sell people on that when they might not even use that transportation, but knowing that it's for the greater good?
Well, I mean, you sell it by you saying it's just part of a vibrant economy in a region. It's just, it really is as straightforward as that. And so they may or may not use it. Their kids almost certainly will use it. 73% of the kids interviewed by Cranes and Millennials said it was a #1 topic that they wanted to see addressed. Certainly that's the case with our Rock Ventures and Quicken Loans team members. But even if you're not going to use it and your kids aren't going to use it, I mean, somebody's going to use it to come to work at your place of business. Somebody's going to use it to get to a job to allow them to come buy something at your store. You might use it a lot more than you think if you have the opportunity to come down to a ball game or do something else with it. So it really is just it's a fundamental piece of infrastructure that we need to have, and ultimately is kind of the rising water floats all boats. I mean, I think people will see multiples of whatever investment that they make from a tax standpoint in the outcome.
I want to talk a little bit about retail, and we talked about a lot of businesses are locating downtown and filling a lot of the space that you have. How difficult still is it for retail to get a foothold in downtown Detroit?
Well, it's been really difficult, but it's changing. I mean, I think we're seeing more all the time, and it typically starts with restaurants, and you've seen the explosion of great restaurants. And then the retailers follow, and you see guys like Moose Jaw and Nike and John Varvatos and all of the great places in Midtown with Shinola and Carhartt and so on. There's always been kind of the debate. You need residential in order to have retail. You need retail in order to get the residential folks down. And I think what a lot of people have done is said, let's do it all together. Let's just do a big bang, create the density, create the kind of scale that's necessary, and I think the results are pretty clear, and we are just getting started. I mean, we Rock and others have timed our retail along Woodward for the completion of the Q line, and so when that's done, I think that the existing retailers and the new ones are really going to take off.
And that is going to do it for MiWeek. Thanks so much for joining us. Stephen Henderson and Nolan Finley will be back next week for a look at the latest headlines. Make sure you check out MiWeek.org for more interviews from Mackinac Island. I'm Christy McDonald. We will see you next week for MiWeek. Take care.